Hello biscuits, it's Cupcake Kami-sama back here, and welcome to another video in which I will finally tackle my biggest goal for 2022. So big, in fact, that it had to be split into sub-goals to clarify what I meant in the first place, and one which has taken me until October to get done. And even now I have to acknowledge that it's more like mostly done, and that it will be a sort of work in progress for probably a while still to come, if not indefinitely. Today I will talk about how I overhauled my wardrobe so that it actually works for me. There is a lot to say about this, and I anticipate it being a long video, which means that time is money and I can't waste either of those things. If I manage to figure out YouTube chapters, then I will endeavor to divide the video up using those. But in case I don't manage that, there will be tiny breaks in between the various sections to break up the whole thing into more manageable chunks, which I will timestamp in the description in case you're only interested in some of the process. Introduction. To understand why I approached this whole process in the way that I did, and not just because that's the type of person that I am, I need to explain why I set one of my goals for 2022 to be a wardrobe overhaul. After 2 years of wearing Lolita very intensively, not quite daily, but averaging around 10 to 12 times per month, a certain degree of burnout and maybe even a sense of boredom is to be expected. That's the closest that I can describe in words the emotional state that I was in at the beginning of the year, though for me this was skewing much more in the way of not knowing what I wanted out of the clothes that I own, other than for them to feel authentically me. This mixed with the pure practicalities that I was trying to navigate, that is, owning a lot of clothes, and yes, wearing them, but still a lot, which translates to taking up a lot of space and not seeing a realistic way of ending the accumulation of said clothes. These two things naturally led me to the conclusion that an overhaul of some sort was in order. The idea of it did extend to my entire wardrobe, however, for the time being my focus was on the Lolita side of it only, as that is A, a lot more specific, and B, taking up a bigger chunk of my identity and style. With this in mind, I figured that the best way to approach this overhaul would be through two main steps: an actual purge and a seasonal split. But as always, things were much easier in theory than in practice. The purge. The principle of doing a wardrobe purge is dead simple. Either get rid of the things you don't wear, get rid of the things you don't like or that don't spark joy, or get rid of the things that don't fit. The first two weren't going to work for me, since I put effort into ensuring that I wear everything, and as someone who buys for keeps, things that I don't like rarely stay with me beyond their welcome. As magpies, most Lolitas can relate to everything sparking joy, so this was a dead end too. Yet the path of getting rid of things that don't fit wasn't as straightforward either, because ultimately my goal is to wear the clothes that I own. So whilst something might not physically fit me very well, if it enables me to wear a lot of my other stuff, then keeping it until I find a replacement is the best long-term solution for me. Just not when I'm not clear on what it is that I want. Knowing that sweet and classic Lolita are my two main substyles was the starting point. What I needed to do first was work out what kind of sweet and classic Lolita I enjoy wearing the most to give me a sense of direction. Fortunately for me, figuring out the sweet side happened pretty naturally. As I reviewed some of the items on my wish list, as well as those that I contemplated buying, the various themes finally clicked into tangible labels that I could use to home in on what my style was. And probably very predictably, it was food-based prints in primary colours, especially red, white and blue, with a vintage or retro feel to them. Hidden in plain sight is the best way to describe this, yet it was still a genuine light bulb moment for me to finally have actual words to describe what was bringing me the most joy. Even more lucky was the fact that of what I already owned, almost all the sweet prints fit under that umbrella. Of those that didn't, one was sold straight away and the other one is allowed to stay as an exception by virtue of being a dream dress. The classic side of my style proved harder to pinpoint, and this is where I had to actually get conscious and rational thinking involved. I have written an entire blog post about how I managed to work this one out, so do check that out if you want more details. My blog is Cupcakes and Unicorns. It's linked in the description box below, and I will include a link to that particular post as well. In short, the process started with reviewing the recent classic looks that I loved, then noting down all the descriptive terms that I would apply to those outfits before bringing them together through common threads and themes. In the end, my classic wardrobe is less, shall I say, taggable, in that it spans a couple of vibes as opposed to being focused on just one like my sweet wardrobe is. Nonetheless, it finally gave me a framework that I could apply to my style, both in terms of what I already owned and what I might want to get in the future. As the above process took literal months, and I was keen to get that wardrobe overhaul started, alongside that I was doing some more typical tests of whether to keep something. Knowing what I wanted to look like helped me decide on what cuts to eliminate from my wardrobe, especially with blouses, but it did little to affect how my clothes fit my body in its current shape and size. When the goal of doing a wardrobe overhaul with the Purge was originally set out, I anticipating setting aside one weekend just for trying on every single blouse and deciding its fate on the spot. Even now, the very thought of doing that is making me tired. So pretty early on it became clear that this wouldn't work for me. What I had though was time. With no rush to get the Purge done by any particular deadline and wanting to get it done well instead of quickly, I could wear one blouse for one day and see how that worked. As an approach, it was much more informative, allowing me the insight of how an item fits throughout the day during the various daily activities, as well as how it fits with various undergarments. Not only that, by keeping a blouse on for a whole day, I knew if it was comfortable in terms of fit, but also in terms of general comfort, how the fabric feels, how it reacts to my lifestyle. Is anything starting to pinch after several hours? All of those little things that you can't find out in a quick try-on that still result in something being worn more often or less. All of my findings from these daily try-ons were duly noted in a Google Slides document with notes about what I liked, what I disliked, which side of my wardrobe I anticipate in the blouse to work with, and a final decision on whether to keep, sell, or replace something. However, once I finally had my finger on what my classic style was, it led to a speed round, so to speak, of trying things on one after another. I knew that high collar blouses, as great as they are, weren't my style anymore, so this was their final chance to prove to me that maybe one of them was a fit so remarkably comfortable or flattering to deserve being an exception. In the end, none of them were. They all got sold by now, and the only blouse I kept from that try-on speed round was one that wasn't even a high neck one, just one I wanted to quickly confirm the fit of. What the Purge accomplished is far more than just a little bit of extra space and extra cash from when something got sold. Removing items that weren't getting worn because they didn't fit increased my confidence and comfort with whatever I do end up wearing. Naming the sort of looks that I want to wear not only enabled me to focus on the things that make me happy, but also reignited a spark of excitement that I started to lose sight of. This doesn't mean that I am now putting myself into a singular box and will no longer be a chameleon eliter. What it means is that within my chameleoning, I am still sticking to a handful of themes and looks that make me feel the most me and where I feel the most beautiful in, and focusing on pursuing those. Even some of the dresses that I knew I wanted to keep, I was suddenly able to view through a new lens and get inspiration for new ways of styling them now that I had a framework that works for me. Yes, in essence, all of this is a very roundabout way of saying get rid of things that don't fit and or that don't spark joy. But when what sparks joy isn't immediately obvious, overanalyzing was the next best thing for me to find that spark of joy, like rediscovering a pretty rug once you move the pile of laundry off of it. The seasonal divide. The second part of the wardrobe overhaul was, thankfully, much more straightforward. Does it mean that it happened sooner? Not at all. Part of me was very reluctant to start moving clothes around until I could name and point to something tangible as my style. Because what if I packed something away and then had a eureka moment and couldn't easily get that thing out, so I'd have to wait until the seasons changed to see if my eureka moment was right or not. But to be completely honest with you, the biggest part was pure procrastination. Yes, with a hint of wanting to wait until the weather had settled at least a little, which the 2022 killer heatwave and a generally much warmer summer than I remember in a while didn't help. Nonetheless, it was mostly procrastination. But in a typical me fashion, whilst I procrastinated on actually doing the thing, I could make myself feel like I was accomplishing something by planning for doing the thing. Some of those were pretty easy, like working out the benefits of splitting my wardrobe into spring, summer and autumn, winter. I mean, I am physically battling to get hangers with clothes in and out. Any bit of space that I can free up by moving the things that weren't going to get worn anyway is a victory. And after 2 solid years of proving that my wardrobe can be worn literally any season of the year, I am done proving that point. I know that I can wear what is technically a Christmassy print in the middle of summer if I want to. The world, let's be honest here, doesn't give a single fuck of whether I do or not. This was always about proving things to myself and proving that I am wearing what I own all year round to justify owning it. So now that I've ticked that box for 2 years straight, and even now, more like 3 years, since at this point I can include 2022 in this mix, I can and am giving it a rest. The only other thing that I could start planning was how I was going to approach this seasonal split. For better or for worse, my wardrobe doesn't have a lot of your very typical seasonal prints. So whilst there was a thing or two, it wasn't enough to make a tangible difference in terms of gaining storage space, which meant needing a different approach. Living in the UK, which is generally pretty mild all year round, also means fewer pieces that are truly seasonally exclusive. Some countries have summers where you can reliably pack all of your cardigans away for 3 months. We are not one of them. The criteria that I ended up with included fabrics, their weight, but also any pattern that was too seasonal, occasions that I could realistically envision myself wearing the dress for, as well as how much room for dressing up and down it offered, and my general feelings about the item, whether I associated it with a particular season or had any compelling arguments one way or another. Since I am still averaging around 10 cords per month, the bulk of my wardrobe would remain as it is, all seasonal. Yet with this handful of criteria, I could find a fair few items that would switch between spring, summer and autumn, winter seasons, and that could live vacuum packed until the time came around again. Once it hit October and the weather stopped giving any indication of any final warmer hiccups, I knew that the time had come to do the deed. Dumping the contents of my Lolita wardrobe onto the bed, I looked at each piece before deciding its fate. Anything that was spring summer only was put to one side to be vacuum packed at the end. Everything else went back in with one small caveat. To avoid repeating this entire process again at the onset of spring, I wanted to already earmark the autumn-winter main pieces that would be switched up at the end of winter. For that purpose, I tied a piece of ribbon around the hanger of the item that I deemed to be cold season only. Since I will be swapping out main pieces and not hangers, the ribbon can stay when the time comes to reverse this, probably around March or April. In the end, my spring-summer main pieces ended up numbering 11. Meta's Polka Dots Shirring Pinafore JSK, Meta's Airline JSK, Innocent World George's Rose JSK, Victorian Maiden's Shirring Frill JSK, Angelic Pretty's Flower Garden JSK, Chrysanthemum Concerto's Lost in the Garden of Eden JSK, Bodyline's Sweet Macaron JSK, Lady Sloth's Look at My Dreamy Sky Casual OP, Meta's Bubble Bath Skirt, Meta's Sailor Tiered Skirt, and Baby's Dreaming Sherbet Skirt. There is technically a 12th piece, which is Baby Soiree of the Beginning of My Memories JSK, but for this winter only I am keeping it with me as I anticipate wearing it for one of the fancier occasions. Although there are fewer of the autumn-winter pieces compared to the spring-summer ones, they are in bulkier fabrics. So this should still amount to roughly the same amount of space taken and freed within my wardrobe. On top of this, once the seasonal change comes around, it will include a bunch of coats and jackets which will free up even more room. With the splitting of my wardrobe's contents done, as well as any minor adjustments that I procrastinated on, like attaching various detachable bits, the inside of my wardrobe looked a little less jam-packed, even though it's still undeniably full. The whole process took about half an hour, and now that I know what is for each season, in the future it should take even less time. I later went over the spreadsheet I used to track when I last wore something to color code my seasonal pieces in order to avoid planning to wear something that's been packed away. But before that, I finished the seasonal divide by throwing in a couple of summer-only pieces from my non-Lolita wardrobe to be put away and then vacuum-packed them all. Word of warning for anyone who plans on doing that: vacuum-packed clothes are unexpectedly heavy. The top of my wardrobe is the only place where I can store this bag, so it was a precarious job trying to lift it up there and not fall off my stepladder. Initially, within the first few days of the split being done, I found myself feeling like I suddenly had less, like there was a gap that needed filling because I had so many fewer dresses and skirts at my disposal. The urge to go on a bit of a spending spree intensified, amplified by the thoughts I had before, like wanting more skirts, etc. Thankfully, spending some time planning outfits for the various upcoming meetups and occasions that I have in my calendar helped to calm down these spending urges. They reaffirmed that I have more than enough clothes to wear, that my options are no less limited than they were before, and that I wouldn't have reached for the bits that I packed away anyway. It took a bit of willpower to resist those shopping spree calls, which is where having a very robust set of rules governing my non-essential shopping habits, as well as a strict wish/need/replace list, came to the rescue by reinforcing the idea that I do not, in fact, need more dresses. It'll be nice to have them, but they're not needed, and I haven't found anything that survived the mandatory cool down wait. Final thoughts. Needless to say that this wardrobe overhaul ended up being the kind of success that I was hoping for. I went into it at the start of 2022 with confusion, indecision, and a bit of boredom, and emerged with clarity, a sense of direction, and a renewed excitement. That is on top of the smaller victory of having a selection of clothes that I don't dread or avoid wearing because of fit, but instead can once again choose anything and not have to worry too much about how big a breakfast I can have. The money from the bits that I have sold along the way has either already been spent on some smaller bits from my need or replace lists, which contribute further to my wardrobe's wearability, or they're waiting around in my PayPal account for some wishlist item to appear. Together with my set of shopping rules, this process resulted in my having the peace of mind that I needed. A cluttered space equals a cluttered mind rings very true, especially for me and my love of keeping my space and my life organized. So more importantly than the immediate gains in storage space or wearability is the positive effect on my emotional well-being that this has had. Whilst I also advocate not rushing into decision on whether to keep or sell stuff, if you're finding yourself in a similar place emotionally with your wardrobe, then consider overhauling your collection too. For your sake, I hope that you won't have to think about it as hard as I had to, because that in itself was quite a weight on my mental health. But if you're also finding the typical approaches to not be effective, maybe something that I've mentioned here will do the trick for you. And on that note, thank you all so much for watching this video. I sincerely hope that you have found it interesting and that maybe there was something in this that you might be able to use. If that's the case, then please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, consider sharing the video even. Every one of those things helps my channel grow and improve, and I am always very grateful for that. If you would like to support me beyond those, then you can either leave a one-off tip using Ko-fi, or join my Patreon with a regular monthly subscription. All patrons receive early access to every single blog post that I publish on cupcakes and unicorns, and as blogging is easier for me than filming and editing, there is more Lolita fashion related content over there, while all patrons on the $2 tier and above receive 1 week early access to every single video that I upload. Thank you all so much again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye!